what happens to Bitcoin in the future? Do we buy dollars? Is that something we do now? Do we buy dollars from entities? Do we buy Bitcoin in the future? Right, when Bitcoin is done being mined, or even before that, how does it come into existence? There's a lot of people that have been asking me over time, and many people just in general that have asked many of you, I'm sure. The exchanges are a lot of the ways that Bitcoin comes onto the market. Well, we have the miners. The miners are the ones that have Bitcoin being mined, coming into existence, and then that Bitcoin is then going to exchanges, a lot of it, whether it's over the counter or whatever it may be, OTC desk, going to exchanges or some type of broker, if you will. This process of the miners creating the Bitcoin, and then we hear one of two ways you get Bitcoin. One is through mining, or one is through peer-to-peer exchange, right? Producing value for someone, a good or service. So when you have miners, though, right now, they have Bitcoin being sold to the exchange because they have costs, right? They have expenses that they need to recapture some of that wealth so that they can pay their expenses. Now, right now, this Bitcoin is going to exchanges and they're getting cash back. They're getting dollars, fiat back. And that's not the conundrum, that's what we see right now in the world, in the ecosystem. And right now, the subsidy is 6.25 Bitcoin, and the halving coming up in a few months, it'll go down to 3.125 Bitcoin per 10-minute transaction, and they get fees on top of that, right? So you have these two ways right now that miners put Bitcoin into the ecosphere, the ecosystem. Going to exchange is one of the main ones. That's where a lot of people, this is where the market goes and trades their dollars and gets Bitcoin. This is the big thing going forward. And again, the miners, I'm not an expert in mining. You have to talk to people like Bob Burnett and people that are actual experts in the mining world and running mining companies. They could be paying some of their expenses in Bitcoin. And that's how it comes out to the market as well, and goes into the market fold. So the other big thing, though, is when this is done in Bitcoin, the hyper Bitcoinization with just Bitcoin, you're not going to have people at an exchange trading Bitcoin to get more Bitcoin. You're not going to have the Coinbases of the world as we know them today. And now those companies, some of them could exist still, but they're going to be very different, or not exist at all. What you're going to have is miners putting their expenses into the world, right? We think of the Fed or the Treasury. They're the ones creating dollars right now. The Fed creates a bond and puts it, or the Treasury creates a bond and puts a bond on the balance sheet of the Fed, and then the Fed sends cash, basically cash springs into existence and appears on the Treasury's balance sheet, and the Treasury goes and spends that into circulation, generally through public works, war, entitlements. That's how these come into the cash comes into the existence now. So the banks or the Fed, doing fractional reserve lending, this is how a lot of the currency comes into existence. Well, in the future, you're going to have work. You're going to have the end game being work. Your time and energy is going to be the trade for your Bitcoin. So you're going to have the miners putting Bitcoin into the market, paying their expenses. So paying the utility companies, paying for their energy in Bitcoin. It's the same thing as you going to work and you're going to take Bitcoin. You're going to then get Bitcoin, and that's going to be the way that Bitcoin comes into existence, because you will be getting paid in Bitcoin. So I think that's the one big thing that I've had many people come to me and say, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, how are you going to buy in the future if Bitcoin's everywhere? You're still going to have dollars. We're going to have dollars to be like this lubricant, or that's where we're still trading in dollars as fiat to get more Bitcoin. And no, the big thing is just, no, it'll be working. People will be trading their time and energy for Bitcoin. And you will, because Bitcoin is valuable and continually goes up over time, it's going to produce and incentivize honest work. If people are not doing honest work, who's going to give up their valuable Bitcoin that continues to increase in purchasing power? You're not going to just give it up for anything. It's going to incentivize better actors, better companies, better politicians, better workers. And those that do not do it will not get left behind. They will learn. They will adapt. They will become better workers. And this is where I believe George Gammon is very wrong, where he says, well, Bitcoin doesn't change you. This stuff doesn't change you. You have BlackRock or ETF or Larry Fink, they're just going to create this new fiat system within Bitcoin again, because it's going to be centralized again with their ETF. And that's where it's wrong because of many things we won't go into now. Because Bitcoin can be audited very quickly and doesn't have to be assayed like gold, and you don't have this huge arbitrage of time and the ability to make all kinds of paper claims and not be able to audit what's really going on. We can do that in Bitcoin. So anyone that does that, like we just saw with FTX, anyone that does that and sells paper into the market and they don't actually have the Bitcoin to back it up, you're going to blow yourself up. And people learn very quickly. We're going to have 1 or 2 more FTXs or a couple more FTXs. People learn very quickly, oh, I can't do that anymore. And it creates a different mindset. Same thing with workers. If you're not getting paid what you think you're worth, that means you need to be a little smarter. You need to adapt. You maybe need to be in a different industry. I know many people 10 years ago, being in graduation ceremonies at Michigan State University, where I went to school and graduated from in the late 2000s, there was all kinds of people from the Far East that were graduating in the sod and grass management, agriculture, farming from Michigan State, which is a very big school for that. But all the Westerners were in MBA, law, doctoral programs, but we don't need any more of those people. We already have too many lawyers. We already have too many of these people. Supply and demand works in the economy as well, and you're not going to get traded much Bitcoin in the future if you're doing something that we don't need. People are going to flow into things that we need. All those financialized positions, the lawyers, whatever it is, accountants, things that are run over by ChatGPT, real estate, things that I used to do for years, those are all going to be automated. ChatGPT will do the jobs of accountants, attorneys, and know everything and be able to feed your product into there. And what are those people going to do? Now, some of them are going to have Bitcoin, or a lot of them will, and they'll be able to have purchasing power that grows over time, which would be great, and they'll spend it back into the economy. But they'll have to then gain more somehow. They'll have to provide more goods and services, more time and energy to get back more Bitcoin. And so it's a virtuous cycle, and it incentivizes people to be good actors, and it incentivizes you to get off your butt. Now, some people can't get off their butt, right? Some people just can't, but that's where actual charity, the churches, or historically these private organizations that do the actual charity actually know the local citadel, the local community that people live in, actually know John down the street or Jane down the street who actually needs help, and they can get help locally instead of a far-off centralized government who has no idea, and they just blanket the world with endless amounts of fiat, just hoping that they can buy votes and get whoever cashed that's raising their hand. So this, at the end of the day, is how this structure works right now, where the miners are the ones. You think of it like the Fed in a way, where the Fed is working at the Treasury to put dollars into existence. That's why the Fed gets wealthier and wealthier, the private bank, the Fed is, because the Treasury keeps putting bonds on their balance sheet, and they get paid, dividends. There's all kinds of ways the Fed gets paid, not to get into that. But the miners are that structure right now, but they're not just printing Bitcoin into existence. There's only going to be 21 million, and they have to use time and energy in order to mine that, and their capital. They have to do that in order to output, in order to get the chance to earn Bitcoin. And then they get that Bitcoin, they might sell some off, like I said, they might pay their expenses to put it into the market, they might sell it off to, again, pay for their expenses, and then that goes into the open market. A lot of that Bitcoin gets sucked up because they have to sell it in order to keep their operations going, which is, again, a beautiful cycle. And then, like we said, these are the beginning, and then at the end, you're gonna have this kind of flip where the miners are really just paying their expenses, and then the miners go away. Then this just transaction fee, or I shouldn't say miners, but the mining of new Bitcoin goes away, and the miners are the ones upholding the structure and security of the network through transaction fees, because then the transaction fees have become so large over time that we're working on other layers which will keep the cost cheaper for the average person, the everyday person. But the first layer, the fees will become so big, it incentivizes, again, people to uphold the network. And not only that, these miners have their very livelihood in the network. So of course there is incentive in many ways to uphold the security of the network and to continue running as a miner. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know. This is something that I've just been working through. I had this question. I had to write this out because I had a bunch of people over, family members, stuff like that, who were asking a lot of these questions. And there were some older people. There were people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and they were asking these questions. Well, what happens when this, So if none of this makes sense, please ask a question. If I've got something that's wrong, this is how I had to stop and get the whiteboard and start whiteboarding it out. That way it made sense to me, because I'm a virtual. I got to see things, or visually, I should say. I'm a visual learner, and so I had to kind of draw this out to see what was actually going on in my own head and to make it make sense. Because again, the big question was how to buy Bitcoin how to buy Bitcoin when fiat is zero. And, I just basically said, do we buy dollars? So you got to look at it kind of from the same way. So no, we trade our time and energy. We go to work, we get a paycheck. Again, at the end of the day, this will be that in the future as well. You will go to work, you will go get a paycheck, but it'll be in Bitcoin. You want to own an apartment complex? Wonderful. You're going to have your tenants, your residents pay you in Bitcoin. You're going to get paid in Bitcoin, and then the people that are lending out, lending will still happen. You'll still have the lending happening, but it'll be based off of equity and not debt. So when you have enough Bitcoin saved up, you'll say, hey, does someone want something to start a company or start a business? Here's a seed round. Here's a amount of capital, amount of equity, amount of Bitcoin to go start said business. And so this stuff will still happen, but it will be in a virtuous cycle, and people will be very incentivized, again, to be careful with their Bitcoin or capital, and they'll do more due diligence. You're incentivized to do more due diligence because Bitcoin is worth something. It's actually worth more, and it keeps increasing over time. So if it's going to keep increasing over time at 5 or 10 or 20% a year, or whatever it is, as the years go on, and right now it's 150% CAGR, compound annual growth rate, but as it goes into the future, it's going to be less each year. But can I get a return by starting a business with somebody or investing with somebody? So that stuff will happen. A lot of these things will happen still. But again, when you try to, as they say, when you play stupid games, you get stupid rewards, like FTX. When you start printing paper claims, and the volatility of Bitcoin as the years go by here will smooth out, will go down over time. But as this happens, where people can actually audit it and actually see what's actually happening, and you're saying that you have something you don't, you get wrecked. So people will inherently, at the end of the day, they will start to become better actors because they will see other people getting wrecked. It's like crossing the street and seeing people get hit by a car. You're not going to keep doing it because you're going to realize this is a fool's errand. So hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, let me know if this made sense or not. This is really the structure. And then at the end of the day, like I said, it's the market. Now we're trading our time and energy. Now the market has the Bitcoin generally, right? At the end, a long time from now, the market just has it. We're in a hyper Bitcoinized state, this last state where the market is trading goods and services for each other. Now you have companies or whatever it might be that are paying each other. People are paying each other in Bitcoin. You're paying the government your taxes if we choose to have government still, or whatever it might be. So this virtuous circle of producing better outcomes because of aligned incentives will happen in the coming years, the coming decades because of this. And it would behoove governments. I just saw some the other day, I believe it was Tim Draper, saying that it would behoove governments to get on the Bitcoin standard now because they can create massive wealth with this over time, and they can get paid in Bitcoin. They can obviously get things done a lot quicker if we are all on the same page. And he's right. Again, if governments, if people choose to continue having governments, it's going to be much easier if you have a good, moral, just, virtuous people using the hardest form of currency ever to exist, the hardest money to ever exist, purest money. So that's why there's so many reasons that you want to have Bitcoin in your portfolio right now as a store of value, as a hedge of what's going on. But for all intents and purposes, it is the future money. It is what is coming, and there's not a lot stopping it. Governments can say what they want and do what they want, but at the end of the day, the people are going to choose. The market chooses. The free market chooses what the best money is. And you have people like the Peter Schiffs of the world and the Dave Ramsey, people saying, it's zero. It's going to go to zero. Or Peter Zion, we're going to zero. It's worth zero. Yet the market, oddly enough, just continues to allocate more and more of their capital, their wealth, their time and energy, which a lot of it's denominated in fiat now. They continue denominating it or allocating it to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin continues to grow over time. So, like I said, I just drew this up. Let me know if you have any questions, and would like any critiques on it, actually, just to see if my thoughts are correct or if I'm just completely off base here. So, appreciate you. Trust, but verify. Question everything with boldness, even the existence of God himself. And this is not financial advice. It is freedom advice. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.